Habemus Papam. Dominum Robertum Franciscum.
That's Robert Francis. That's Prevost.
We always called him Father Bob. This is a game changer now.
This is beyond our wildest dreams.
This is exciting. We're from Chicago to have a Chicago Pope. That's awesome.
It's fantastic. I mean, south side of Chicago, I mean, how could you not be excited?
Whoever said Cubs on the radio got it wrong. It sucks. He is now who he was in high school and in college. He is steady. He is gentle, he is kind.
This was the Pope's house, and it just brings us so much joy. And the community is coming together.
What did he imagine as a child looking at that window? It sort of brings the faith closer to home.
The world will be watching his every step.
Thank you for joining me in Rome as we trace the life of a boy named Robert from Chicago's South Side to Peru and eventually to Rome, to be elected the 267th pontiff, Leo XIV. He showed a commitment to the Catholic Church at a young age, and it all started in Chicago. Long before he was Pope Leo XIV, Robert Prevost was born September 14, 1955 at Chicago's Mercy Hospital. His parents, Louis and Mildred Martinez Prevost. These newspaper articles from the Dalton Pointer paint a picture of a family heavily involved at St. Mary of the Assumption Church. Mildred, president of the Altar and Rosary Society, and seen here helping with a parish celebration in 1962. She was a librarian with a master's in education. Her husband served as school superintendent in Glenwood. Here he was in the Chicago Tribune in '66. Robert was the youngest of three boys. His older brothers, Louis and John, seen here as winners of a contest at St. Mary's. The middle child, John, could see the writing on the wall of what his brother would become one day.
I think he knew it by first grade that he was going to be a priest. And there was no question in anyone's mind.
The Pope grew up in this home in suburban Dalton and attended St. Mary's. Built in 1956, the parish in the city's Riverdale neighborhood was a combined school and church building. He even served as an altar boy there.
He was always focused and dedicated on his faith. He had a level of spirituality at an early age that was undeniable.
Marianne Angarola and the Pope attended St. Mary's together for all 8 years. But did she know what he would later become?
This is not a surprise to us. He was different than the rest of us. At an early age, to embody the kindness and goodness that emanated from him, that was unique.
St. Mary's merged with another parish in 2011, and the now vacant building has seen better days. But these walls mark the start of Pope Leo's religious journey, and for that, its current owner is grateful.
It's actually a blessing to be a part of something so historic, and I want to preserve as much as I can so that people could actually come by and see where he got his start.
During Pope Leo's childhood, the Augustinian order would send representatives into Catholic grammar schools to recruit young men to become priests. They found a young Robert Prevost and the now Reverend William Lago from St. Torribius Catholic Church.
I brought the brochure home. I gave it to my mother. She says, well, you're not doing anything in the summer. Why don't you go? And that's how I started, and that's where I met him in 1966 in a seminary week in Holland, Michigan.
Though he felt called to the priesthood, there were challenges. He left home after the 8th grade to join the Augustinian seminary, returning only for summer vacations and holidays.
We knew it was coming, and so it wasn't a shock. I think more than being a shock, I think it was, we're going to miss him, because we drove him to Holland, Michigan, and unpacked. The ride going home was horrible in terms of sadness, because he's gone.
Former classmates say he was studious, had a sense of humor, and took his time making decisions, qualities that would serve him well in future roles.
He was always very kind and generous. He was attentive to people. I'm sure that's going to continue.
Reverend Lago would go on to attend even more schooling with Prevost. Seminary school in Michigan, Villanova University, and further studies to earn divinity degrees at Catholic Theological Union in Hyde Park. The Pope graduated in 1982. Sister Barbara Reed is now the president.
Here at CTU, we claim as one of our strengths that we form ministers for the world church with a global perspective, with the heart of a missionary, and certainly now Pope Leo XIV embodies those characteristics.
From there, he headed off to Rome to study canon law. The Catholic Theological Union hoped he would join the faculty, but instead he became a missionary in Peru. Prevost returned to Chicago for a few stretches to take on Augustinian leadership roles, and he's continued to come back to the Midwest over the years, inspiring people like Father Jack Tierney.
I've been to dinners and ordinations and fundraisers, and he's such a good man. I mean, I'm so inspired by his personal example of holiness and doing what is right. You know, he's a quiet guy. He's not like pomp and circumstance and, you know, everybody turns when he enters a room. He kind of slips in the back door.
And the Chicago connections don't end there. About 50 years ago, Prevost was a substitute physics teacher at St. Rita High School. NBC5's Randy Gyllenhaal brings us reaction from the students there.
And when they came out and said, you know, it was Cardinal Prevost, the whole school erupted because they were watching this on TV.
Yeah, people were cheering. You could hear it up and down the hallways, just the roar of everybody in the classrooms.
Now known as Pope Leo XIV, Prevost has deep ties to this Augustinian institution. Climbing the ranks at the Vatican, he'd often return here to give Mass. Many students have met him. He's an honorary alum.
Definitely a Southside legend. You know, he's very important in our school.
So many Southside Catholic families feel the same, and Pope Leo still keeps in touch.
I sent him an email saying, Bob, I'm praying for you and all the cardinals. Come, Holy Spirit. And he responded, thanks, Tom. Keep praying.
Father Tom McCarthy hoping his students take inspiration of the Pope's path from Chicago to glory and his simple roots.
And you don't have to be some big, powerful person. You just got to be yourself. And that's who Bob Prevost is. We know who he is as Augustinians. We can't wait for the world to see who he is.
We are getting unique insight into where Pope Leo stands on the issues by looking at his social media postings. The Vatican has maintained a social media presence. That is not necessarily new. But what NBC5's Charlie Wojciechowski shows us is Pope Leo is the first to have a social media presence before he was elected Pope.
As a cardinal, Robert Francis Prevost was no stranger to social media. His X thread, active since 2011, now has hundreds of thousands of followers and is filled with insight into the new Pope's religious and political positions.
So out of 267 popes, 266 of whom are the successor to St. Peter, this is the first time we have somebody who's got a social footprint, a social media footprint.
Prevost's last post before his elevation was a repost of Catholic commentator Rocco Palmo, criticizing the Oval Office meeting of El Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele and President Trump, referring to the illicit deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The new pope has also been critical of Vice President J.D. Vance online, responding to this January 29th Fox News appearance.
You love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then, after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world.
Days later, Prevost shared a link to a National Catholic Reporter article headlined, J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others.
These are all things that are kind of gospel-rooted. They're not new to anyone. They've been thought about for a long time.
But those same posts are already drawing fire from the religious right, who are starting to refer to Leo XIV as the new woke pope. But Kabizzi says Pope Leo XIV is uniquely American.
The Pope really is the most global public figure that we have in the world now. And now it's a Chicagoan. It's an American. And again, somebody of incredible humility. Who doesn't seem about this, it's not about him, that just exudes from him.
We're also getting more insight into who is Pope Leo from my conversation with Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich. Cupich says Leo lives Pope Francis's message, and he also offered more about the conversation inside the conclave.
People are really proud that Chicago produced a pope. You don't think of that.
Was it obvious that he was the choice?
Well, no, I guess it became more and more, it grew on us because there were some really fine candidates. We have a deep bench. So I think that it was just, it was, like peeling an onion, layer by layer. And all of a sudden, it just seemed to be the right fit. He has many of the qualities that people have in south side of Chicago, loves his family, has a deep faith, is someone who's not afraid of hard work, and is loyal to people.
What do you think Catholics would like to know? What should they know about him?
I think that they should know that he cares deeply about them, their struggles in life, the fact that they are on a pilgrimage through life with many pitfalls, that we all stray, and so it makes it important for us to accompany each other. Much of the teachings of Pope Francis, I think, are lived by Pope Leo XIV.
So why did he choose the name Leo? It's a direct reference to Leo XIII, but he also explains he was influenced by AI, artificial intelligence.
E al tempo stesso, secondo la promessa che Gesù stesso ci ha fatto.
Days after becoming the leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV delivered his first formal address. He spoke of his respect for Pope Leo XIII, who championed social issues and workers' rights after the Industrial Revolution.
La cura amorevole degli ultimi, degli scartati.
In Italian, Pope Leo said, quote, "In our own day, the Church offers to everyone the treasury of her social teaching in response to another industrial revolution and to developments in the field of artificial intelligence that pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. The papacy itself has been the target of disinformation generated by AI. In 2023, an AI-generated photo of Pope Francis wearing a trendy puffer jacket went viral. NBC News called it one of the first widespread incidents showcasing the potential of AI to mislead and inform. And just last year, Pope Francis issued a warning, cautioning against the potential for AI to generate false narratives and to further create, quote, echo chambers and, quote, new castes based on access to information and thus giving rise to new forms of exploitation and inequality. It seems Pope Leo XIV weighed this heavily when choosing his name.
Leo XIII was the first pope in the modern era who saw the place of the church in the world.
I caught up with Pope Leo's brother John Prevost here in Rome, and we talked about the name the new pontiff chose. How about the name? What do you make of that?
See, when he mentioned it, I told him, interesting thought. I don't know a whole lot about Leo, so it's a learning experience now for me too, to try to do some research and see why. And I'm gathering because Pope Leo was for the working class.
Pope Leo XIV, a pope for the people. Just hours after taking that name, he presided over his first Mass in the Sistine Chapel, and his first words were in English.
And I know I can rely on each and every one of you to walk with me as we continue as a church.
And in his first Sunday message, Pope Leo spoke to young people, telling them they had a home in the church and not to fear. He also called for peace in Ukraine and Gaza. So might one of those blessings go to a Chicago sports team? One of the questions on many minds, is he a Cubs fan or a Sox fan? Well, check out this picture posted by the Sun-Times. Yes, that is Pope Leo in the upper left corner, known then simply as Robert Prevost, at a White Sox World Series game. Courtney Sisk takes us to the first Sox game since that revelation.
White Sox fans are celebrating the new Pope and his fandom of the team.
Those White Sox.
And on the field, a special tribute. The Chicago White Sox claiming the Pope as one of their own.
My father is probably in heaven jumping around right now.
Alejandra Martinez is a lifelong Sox fan and can't believe she has that in common with the Pope.
I seen people when they announced it crying in tears, you know, because it means so much to have a Pope. And the fact that it's from Chicago, I think that is just speechless.
For others, it makes him feel more relatable.
That was pretty cool. It's going to be someone that we can relate to that comes from our area.
Fans are hoping this can help their season.
He's committed to a good cause, that's for sure. Being a Sox fan, you know, you got to be for the people.
Also heard that he doesn't put ketchup on his hot dogs.
Well, we can't confirm that yet. We'll have to ask, but fans are certainly hoping that there will be some divine intervention for their season.
That was Courtney Sisk reporting. Thanks, Courtney. So the Pope is a Sox fan, and he's also an Augustinian. We'll take a look at what that means and what it will mean for his papacy. And could a Chicago visit be on the horizon? We'll take you back to the last time a Pope came to town, back in 1979. But before we take a quick break, a little levity over the papal announcement. Clever social media postings in the form of memes. Check it out. By now you've heard Pope Leo is an Augustinian. That's one of the 2,500 religious orders within the Catholic Church. Depending on the order, you take certain vows. For the Augustinians, the emphasis is on preaching, teaching, and serving the poor. Born in the year 354 in Algeria, Aurelius Augustine was a teacher who went on a spiritual journey in his adulthood. He was baptized at the age of 33 and lived in a monastery-like setting with other faithful men. Eventually, Augustine became a bishop. He made dozens of trips to North Africa to share his religious beliefs. In the year 1244, the Order of St. Augustine was founded in Tuscany, Italy. Today, there are 2,800 Augustinians worldwide, including regional provinces in Philadelphia, San Diego, and right here in Chicago.
Our life is built on living together.
Father Sam Jutras of St. Rita Parish is part of the Order of Augustinians. They follow the examples set by St. Augustine.
We are priests and brothers who live together in one house. We take the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience to our prior general of the order, of the whole congregation of Augustinians worldwide.
Father Patrick McGrath of Old St. Patrick's Parish in Chicago says we'll see the teachings of St. Augustine exemplified through Pope Leo XIV.
I think you'll see that in the Pope as he acts out his life as Pope. The training is different. The training is different than diocesan priests. It's rooted very much in the life of the community.
Showing the world what it means to be an Augustinian.
But a real emphasis on community, learning, hospitality, pastoral care, and social justice, I think would be hallmarks of the Augustinian that you'll see. They follow the rule of St. Augustine, so it's a rule or a way of living religious life imagined by St. Augustine himself. And now lived out by the Augustinians.
Brother Frank Connor says watching a fellow Augustinian lead the Catholic Church is surreal. He has a special connection to the new Pope.
I didn't think the Cardinals would ever pick an American Pope for one, and then a Pope that lived in the same house that I'm currently living in across the street. And walking out, I think a lot of us Augustinians were on the verge of tears at that moment. Tears of joy, obviously, but deeply moved.
And he's excited for what this moment means to Augustinians across the world.
I think for the Augustinians, it'll be great for us in terms of vocations, bringing up awareness of our order. So I'm really excited about what's ahead.
Pope Leo's election certainly has brought Chicagoans to Rome, some of them flying out that very day. I spoke to several of them from New Lenox who know him simply as Father Bob. What a difference a week makes. Pope Leo was here last week as Cardinal Prevost. Now there's security and a crowd waiting to see him. The Pope left the Augustinian home after lunch, and with so many who want to look and touch and see him, clearly his life has changed overnight.
We know him.
Pope Leo's 3 friends from St. Jude Parish in New Lenox are here in Rome. They were able to meet briefly with him Sunday and are still on a high that he was chosen.
His name was announced and I lost it. The tears. The world right now is a little fractured, and I think he's a good and will be a great bridge builder.
The Catholic Church has elected the first ever Pope from America. And as an American Catholic, I could not be more proud, which is a sin, and now I'm ashamed.
They told him about Saturday Night Live and the other memes that have highlighted his Chicago roots. Their conversation Sunday, just old friends catching up.
We talked politics, religion, and White Sox. And White Sox and sports. We shared some memes with him. Yeah, we shared some that memes we'd seen, Chicago related. He was laughing.
They believe he's the right person, despite all the pressures he will no doubt face.
He's still Father Bob, but yet he still has all the responsibility of the job on his shoulders, and I'm sure, I pray that he does a good job.
The last time a pope visited Chicago was in October 1979. Pope John Paul II spent 2 days in the city. It drew enormous crowds. And while it was more than 40 years ago, people remember it well. In fact, NBC5's Lexi Suter spoke to 2 of them for this Only in Chicago story.
It was a crisp fall day when Pope John Paul II made his way toward downtown Chicago.
It was just a sea of people.
Tens of thousands of people lined the streets, hoping to get a glimpse of the Holy Father. Dave Brensick and his family were some of the lucky ones.
As the motorcade passed by, right when he was going past my grandparents' house, he turned and he made the sign of the cross. So, of course, my grandparents nearly fainted because the Pope blessed their house. And we were just all so excited.
The Pope's first stop was at Holy Name Cathedral. Luciano Pavarotti sang Ave Maria as Chicago enthusiastically welcomed this Polish Pope.
When you saw him, there was some sort of, lack of a better word, a magic that came out of him, an enchantment that came out, and you felt that with his words, with his actions, with his movement.
At that time, Richard Oshani was a college sophomore at DePaul and the founder of the Student Polish Alliance. That title gave him the great honor of receiving communion at the Pope's Mass outside 5 Holy Martyrs Parish in Brighton Park.
When we got up on the altar, it was just I've never witnessed anything like that in my life at that point.
Do you remember how you were feeling?
Nervous.
He owns a piece of the carpet Pope John Paul stood on that October day. And he kept a CTA pass, more like a golden ticket, to get downtown for the main event, a massive public mass in Grant Park.
It was euphoria. It was a frenzy of euphoria because nobody's ever seen a pope.
The Bears winning the Super Bowl, the Bulls, Michael Jordan. And that's what it was kind of like. It was that type of event where people just came together for a love of something, and this was a love of their Catholic faith and this Pope. It was such a prayerful Mass. People were energized by seeing the Pope. It's just a memory that I cherish.
An estimated 1.2 million people gathered here in Grant Park, and as you just heard, it's an experience people remember so vividly. Now the question, will our hometown guy, Pope Leo XIV, do something similar? Only time will tell. Marianne, back to you.
We've talked about Pope Leo's childhood and his adult life. We'll take a look at how this will shape the church moving forward. And the Pope spent decades in Peru. We'll show you where you can get a taste of the culture here in Chicago. Welcome back to Rome, where we're diving into the life and teachings of Chicago-born Pope Leo XIV. There are early indications Pope Leo will share the priorities of his predecessor, Pope Francis. That has Catholics optimistic. He will continue that legacy of reaching out to the poor and those who are marginalized.
Ratto on them.
In September 2023, Pope Francis made then Archbishop Robert Prevost a cardinal. The same year, he called on Prevost to oversee the powerful office that selects and manages bishops around the world.
He's a priest who became a bishop, who is a talented global thinker, and that was recognized by Francis for sure, and now it's recognized by the entire College of Cardinals, so it's pretty extraordinary.
When I interviewed then Father Prevost back in 2013, he spoke highly of Francis.
I knew him when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He's a man who, on the one hand, is very simple and very profound in his faith, but he's a hard worker, and he knows, I think, what's ahead of him.
Francis appointed 108 of the 133 electors. The now Pope Leo's international experience meant he was well known to the cardinals, and that's how Dr. Kathleen Cummings from the University of Notre Dame sees him, as a global figure.
He's a bridge between continents, between the United States, between South America, and between Europe, and specifically with the Vatican, with all his time there.
Catholics are optimistic he will carry on Francis's outreach to the poor and people who have been marginalized. Progressives believe that he will continue Francis's reformist agenda. Sister Barbara Reed sees Leo as the perfect successor.
Pope Francis, I think, confided in him and certainly recognized his abilities and his gifts by putting him in the positions that he has in the last several years, positions of a lot of influence.
Pope Francis upheld the ban on female priests, but overall he took major strides to promote women in leadership roles. Cummings says Francis planted a seed, and it's up to the next Pope, Leo, to water that seed.
He talked about how women should have a say in the selection of bishops. It seems like he is a promoter of women's leadership, and I hope that's true. I hope he continues what Pope Francis started doing, but we'll have to wait and see.
Another thing Pope Leo has had in common with many Catholic leaders before him, he's been in charge when priests under his supervision have had accusation of sexual abuse. Victims' advocates have questioned how Leo handled cases in Chicago and Peru. But it's important to note, no one has accused Leo himself of any abuse. During the Pope election, the cardinals broke from tradition by choosing an American. Father Pat McGrath tells us how his Chicago roots proved to be an asset.
There's a vibrancy to the Catholic Church in Chicago, and to be shaped by it, very clear sense of parish citizenship in Chicago, identifying oneself by parish, knowing what parishes' personalities and characters might be.
And it's a way for U.S. Catholics, I think, to get more connected to the Church.
At a time when Americans are disaffiliating from their Catholic roots and leaving the Church altogether, there's new hope now that a Pope who plays Wordle and has watched the Conclave movie might be more relatable.
I think especially for young American Catholics, most of whom are very disengaged from the life of the Church, anything that's going to open that door, anything that's going to suggest that the Church is a place for conversation, for dialogue, for an inclusivity of folks who don't always feel at home in the Church, anything that moves us down that road is going to be reinvigorating for the Church.
Father Michael Flager from St. Sabina's, Catholic priest and activist, reacts to the announcement of Pope Leo and talks about how his background and his heart will guide the Church's future.
I'm pleasingly shocked. I think it's, he was a missionary, he was a parish priest, spent all this time in Peru, so certainly understands the poverty, understands the struggle for justice. I'm very hopeful. I think this is, what's most important to me, to be honest with you, is I don't care what country, what race, what culture he comes from, that he has the heart that Francis had and the heart that Jesus had. I think that what's important right now, and what message was sent when we saw the death of Francis, the message was clear across his world, not just his country, that that's the kind of Pope with that heart, that humility, and that courage is what the people are looking for. And so you can't miss that, you can't deny that. So I'm encouraged, I'm excited. I think it's this could be a good continuation of Francis's heart and Jesus' heart going forward.
Pope Leo didn't take a moment of rest before getting right to work, and one of his first stops was to thank the thousands of journalists who have been in Rome covering the conclave. He thanked them for their work. Pope Leo XIV meeting with journalists from across the world who have been at the Vatican covering the conclave, joked briefly.
Thank you for this wonderful reception. They say when they clap at the beginning, it doesn't matter much. If you're still awake at the end and you still want to applaud, thank you very much.
His message, however, a serious one, noting artificial intelligence requires responsibility.
Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
After blessing about 2,000 in the room, the Pope met with several journalists, including NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt. The Pope's brother, John Prevost, as well as Father Ray Flores from New Lenox, have been here since Saturday, having a chance to meet privately with the new Pope. They realize the Church is looking for a renewal.
First from the United States, first from Chicago. He's kind of young. Tremendous responsibility. The world will be watching his every step.
Pope Leo will continue to lead us into a time of hope, especially during this Jubilee year.
From Chicago! Chicago!
NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt got to meet the Pope in person. He spoke to me afterwards about their conversation.
Well, you know, I'm waiting for him to come down the aisle. It was obviously he was going to reach me, and of course your mind begins to think, I wasn't really prepared for a full interview here. What am I going to say? And he came by, and then we discussed, I think what was on a lot of people's minds is the outpouring back home, back in the United States, Chicago, and I asked him about that, the significance of being an American Pope, and he says, you tell me, suggesting that he's kind of finding out for himself, and he noted that he'd heard some stories of people who have returned to the faith. In fact, one I think he related was in Chicago, of people who have returned to the faith, and that's a good thing. And it may be, and this is where I'm filling in a little bit, it may be a harbinger of some of the good of having an American Pope.
He seemed at ease, even though this was his first big sort of walking through and meeting a lot of people.
You say that, and a lot of us have been saying that too from the moment he stepped out. Like, this guy seems at ease. I mean, you know, given the all that the responsibility he has, but seemed very genteel. He visited with a lot of people along the line there who are not journalists, but other people, and seemed to take his time and have great patience and enjoyed the moment.
Any chance we might see him?
You know, I asked him specifically, I said, any chances of getting back home, meaning Chicago, United States, and he said, I don't think so. And I think that falls in line with what we've been hearing, that they've got a lot of work to do here. He has a lot of work to do here at the Vatican, and so that's right now the main focus.
The excitement of seeing and hearing this announcement of a new Pope was palpable. From that moment in the square when we were just all quite surprised to learn it was not only an American, but someone who was a native Chicagoan, to watching these first couple of days to see how quickly his life has changed. Take a look at some of the sights and sounds. A baby seagull landed on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, the first positive omen before the white smoke arrived. Just after 11 a.m. Chicago time on May 8th, on the fourth ballot of the conclave, it was finally go time. A new pope had been chosen. Joy erupted from St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, and 1 hour later, the words everyone was waiting to hear.
Dominum Robertum Franciscum.
The first American pope.
I wasn't sure if I had heard correctly.
A brother.
And I just freaked out and said, "It's Rob, oh my God." And I was up, dressed, out, just going nuts.
A friend and mentor.
They announced his name in Latin, Robertus Franciscus, and I lost it. I'm like, I know this guy.
An Augustinian.
Someone rushed into the sacristy saying, "It's an Augustinian. It's an Augustinian Pope." And so I was totally shocked.
A Chicagoan.
I just hope it brings Catholics home.
The Chicagoland, born and raised, Robert Prevost became Pope Leo XIV. He stepped out onto the balcony to thunderous applause. His blessings traveled across continents, home to the Windy City, where people immediately started gathering in the places that raised the Holy Father, his humble beginnings in Dalton.
We know that this was the Pope's house, and it just brings us so much joy.
You could come from somewhere like this and become somebody big in the future.
And the Pope's home parish, just up the road.
I'm overwhelmed. It's a sacred building.
Some of the imagery is beautiful to think about. There's a stained glass window with St. Peter's over there, so I just thought, what did he imagine as a child, looking at that window, and now where is he?
Our Father, who art in heaven.
And at Holy Name Cathedral, a special moment for parishioners and visitors learning of the news while in Mass.
I'm absolutely overjoyed. I can't believe we got to be here in Chicago when they named the first American Pope.
Across the city, an immediate outpouring of support from Catholics and non-Catholics for this homegrown Pope. Since his election, the Prevost family roots have been researched. Christian Farr reports genealogists have been digging into his New Orleans roots, and his racial background is very diverse.
The selection of Cardinal Prevost came as a surprise. The only thing I knew about him was that he was an American.
But when New Orleans-based genealogist Jean Ahern dug deeper into Pope Leo XIV's family roots, he uncovered a history that has drawn a lot of attention, especially on social media.
Them and their ancestors were fairly consistently listed as colored or mulatto or black in census documents and in vital records and things like that.
Before coming to Chicago, the Pope's family on his mother's side lived in New Orleans, and before that, the country of Haiti.
Their story is like so many families where their particular branch left the South, left New Orleans somewhere between 1910 and 1911, and went to Chicago, and as we say, passed for white, or Passa Blanc, as we say it here in Louisiana.
I looked into some of the birth certificates, death certificates, census records, and sure enough, his ancestors were listed as black at some period.
Chicago-based genealogist Tony Burrows also looked into the Pope's family, and he also discovered that on his maternal side, that the family's racial identification varied depending on which census report was reviewed.
I was able to go back to the 1850s, and they were listed as mulattoes in 1850, 1860, 1870. Then when you get to 1880, they were listed as white. When you get to 1900, they were listed as black. And then after that, they were listed as white.
Burrows and Honore say maintaining the racial designation of white for the Pope's family was probably done for a very good reason, because in the early 20th century, blacks had a very low position on America's social structure.
They were able to move up on that economic ladder. So it's basically a defensive mechanism.
Of course, there's reaction from New Orleans as well. They're feeling a certain kinship to the new Pope. Here at the Vatican, the papal merchandise is everywhere. Also in Chicago, businesses are capitalizing as well. For instance, Portillo's, it's taken its signature Italian beef. Now it's calling it the Leo. V. Wynn shows us more on how the Pope is making a mark.
Behind the line at Portillo's, workers in the kitchen are whipping up their Italian beef sandwich to pay homage to Pope Leo XIV.
We were just thrilled and proud that someone from our great city was elevated to this wonderful position, and we just wanted to pay homage to that and celebrate together with the rest of Chicago.
Chicago businesses are coming up with different ways to honor the new American Pope. Portillo's went ahead and renamed its Italian beef the Leo for the month of May.
The beef roasted 4 hours, right? We use this wonderful spiced gravy that we have. and then it's double dipped. So we're kind of baptizing it twice.
At Venison's Bakery in Evanston,
Dip in my sprinkles.
Hector Martinez is busy making these Pope cookies.
When they start open the store, is people come and make a line, they're on the line for the cookies.
The sugar cookie to commemorate the Pope is dipped in sprinkles and icing with an edible image of him waving from the Vatican balcony in his first appearance to the world.
I'm not Catholic, but I was so excited that an American, first of all, was chosen, and then somebody from Chicago, and then somebody from Dalton. My wife's from Dalton.
The family-owned bakery started selling them yesterday and sold out of 6 dozen. So far, the bakery has made more than 300 cookies to fill orders in person and online. The owner told NBC5 they had to get in on the fun.
Kind of take advantage of every opportunity we get to sell some cookies. So he's not doing as well as Taylor Swift did, but all in all, I think it's worth the effort.
Other merchandise like t-shirts have flooded the internet. Obvious Shirts with a storefront in Wrigleyville is accepting pre-orders online for its Pope Leo XIV collection. Shirts with phrases like "Da Pope" if he's a Bears fan, and "Sweet Pope Chicago 14" to represent the South Side.
Rumor has it, Portillo's chocolate cake was one of Pope Leo's favorite desserts when he was studying at Catholic Theological Union. I can't verify it, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I can confirm when Pope Leo visited Chicago in August 2024, he did visit Aurelia's Pizza in Homewood. However, pizza may not be his favorite. The food guy shows us how we can get a taste of Leo's Peruvian pick next. We also wanted to show you where Pope Leo might spend some of his summer retreat time. We are in Castel Gandolfo. To get here, the road is winding and offers a scenic view. There's beautiful Lake Albano. It is where for 400 years there's been a papal summer retreat. 135 acres in Castel Gandolfo. 12 years ago, Pope Benedict came here to initially retire. While other popes enjoyed Castel Gandolfo, Pope Francis did not, and it became a museum. The locals, though, are hoping Leo will once again come to the window to bless the tourists and provide an economic boost. When Pope Leo was named, Chicagoans were not the only ones claiming him as one of their own.
El Papa es peruano.
That's Peru's president saying the Pope is Peruvian. And after spending more than 2 decades there, you can bet one of his favorite dishes is Peruvian as well. Our food guy, Steve Dolinsky, shows us where you can tap into the South American Peruvian roots in Chicago.
Hi, Marianne. Well, as people know, the Pope was from the South Side, therefore probably not a deep dish guy. He grew up in the shadow of places like Palermo's 95th, Home Run Inn, Vito and Nick's, and yes, his beloved Aurelio's in Homewood. Therefore, he was a Chicago thin, aka tavern-style pizza fan. But what a lot of people don't realize was that he spent more than 20 years living in Peru, and he had a couple of favorite dishes there. One in particular is served here at a restaurant in Rogers Park.
The pontiff's time in Peru has suddenly led to interest in Peruvian food, and at the 27-year-old Taste of Peru in Rogers Park, curiosity has been spiking.
We have gotten so many different calls, and everybody is just so happy in the community to have a Chicago Peruvian Pope.
The national dish is unquestionably ceviche, and every Peruvian restaurant in Chicago offers their own version. Here, they begin with corvina, but combine it with indigenous peppers.
Like ají amarillo and ají rocoto in the mix as well. There's lime juice, a little bit of garlic that has been blended. The juice of the fish really ties it all together.
The lime juice literally cooks the fish, but keeping it firm. Alongside Peru's beloved potatoes, 2 varieties always.
In the middle, there's this big corn, which is called choclo. It's a Peruvian variety of giant corn.
Topped with a mound of red onions and some more ricotta pepper. It's a refreshing starter. But Pope Leo's favorite dish, it turns out, is a stew called seco, made with goat.
It's served traditionally with rice and canary beans, canario beans, also called peruano beans. It's a very time-consuming process, and we let that marinate overnight for about 10 to 12 hours. And then you begin the stewing process, which actually takes about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Taste of Peru makes it with goat or lamb, cooked with Peruvian pumpkin and more peppers.
Add a little bit of ají amarillo to it, and you cook it in beer. It has to be a Peruvian beer.
And the owners here at Taste of Peru say that the Leo XIV, or Leo XIV dish, is not going anywhere as long as there is demand for it. In Rogers Park, Steve Dolinsky, NBC5 News. Marianne, back to you in Rome.
Thank you, Steve. Now, you don't have to be a seasoned Catholic to be excited about the choice of Pope Leo. Next, we'll take you to an elementary school where some of the city's youngest children are celebrating. When the conclave was happening here in Rome, students at a Northside Catholic elementary school, they staged their own version. You can imagine they were pretty excited when Pope Leo was announced. NBC5's Leanne Trotter went back to Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Lakeview for the celebration.
I never would have expected it to be like a Chicagoan Pope, and for it to be a Chicagoan Pope is pretty amazing.
Today's announcement has special meaning for students here at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Academy in Lakeview. Earlier this week, they participated in a mock conclave with all the protocols and vestments, just like the real one.
And it was a really cool experience to learn about it that way.
It just has taught me so much that I probably would never have known if we didn't have this experience with the mock conclave, and then now like we were all chanting USA in the lunchroom when he came out, and it was just so cool.
I learned that it doesn't really matter if you're a pope or not. You can still do good things even if you're not a pope.
And today, when the white smoke started happening, students couldn't help but get excited.
It was just completely unexpected, and I was just in my classroom. I was going to go down to recess, but then my teacher started saying white smoke, and then the whole class, the whole school just comes into her classroom.
I was having lunch, and then they turned on the TV, and it's white smoke. Someone yells white smoke, but somebody goes out handing around American flags, and everyone just screams.
It was fun, but absolute chaos.
The school's admissions director was the one who coordinated the mock conclave.
I know they'll never forget these past 3 days. And you're only a kid once, you know, so everything we can do here to make just daily life special and different means the world to me and everyone that I work with here.
He says he couldn't have predicted this outcome and hopes it means a lot to the students.
So in fact, we actually elected the first Chicago Pope here, you know, so the second one in Rome, you know, he's the second Chicago Pope. We got our first one here.
Thank you for joining us as we took a look at Pope Leo XIV's life, his legacy in Chicago, what it could mean for the future of the church. If you would like to watch more of our stories, check out our website, NBCChicago.com. And I'll be joining you back in Chicago very soon.